This video is for the Unit 2 Renew review. It's the second part, so this is what you are supposed to do by Wednesday before you take the test. So for problem 11, they ask us to solve into graph. Step 1, box your term or your variable. So I put my box. Remember, the sign in front of the number goes with the number, so the minus in front of the 2 makes it a -2. Step 2 is going to be to move what's outside the box, which would be the 13. We move it by doing the opposite. So I'm going to subtract 13 from both sides. I'm left with -2x is greater than 6. From here, -2 and x are attached through multiplication. To get rid of multiplication, or the opposite, is division. So I'm going to divide by -2. And then, like I was saying on the first video, I'm immediately going to remember to flip my sign because I said the words divide by negative. So I'm just going to go ahead and flip my sign before I move anything else. I divide both sides by -2, and x is less than -3. So that's what I need to write here. Remember, you do have to write out your solution as well as graph it. Because my letter is on the left side, I can graph very easily. So 0 is in the middle, -3 would be on the left side. X is everything less than -3. I have an empty bubble because there's no line under the inequality, and less than goes to the left. For problem 12, the first thing I need to do is distribute to get rid of the parentheses. So I distribute 3. So 3 goes to x and to -5. Everything else stays the same. And then I'm going to multiply these. That's what distribution is. It's multiplication, basically. So the 6x minus 9 less than sign stays the same. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times -5 is -15. Step 3, because I have x's on both sides, I need to move the smaller one. So I'm going to move the -3. I'm going to move 3x by subtracting. That's why I said -3. So I have 3x and 6x. Again, pick on the smaller guy. I'm going to move it through subtraction because that is the opposite. So 3x minus 9 less than -15 all stay the same. So 6x minus 3x is 3x. Just make sure you watch your signs. My next step is to box my term or my variable. And now I am going to move the -9 by adding because that's the opposite. So I add 9 to both sides. 3x is less than -6. And then divide by 3. Again, because I did not say -3, I don't have to worry about changing my sign. So x is less than -6 divided by 3 is -2. So again, because I did not say divide by negative, I do not flip my sign. My letter's on the left side, so I can go ahead and graph this because I don't have to worry about switching anything. -2 is to the left of 0. This is an open bubble because there is no line under the inequality, and x is less than goes to the left, so that is the direction. So on these, make sure you are solving and graphing. Even if you solve incorrectly, still graph it, because if you graph according to what you said your solution is and the graph matches your solution, we can give you points to the graph even if your solution's wrong. So don't leave it all blank. Try to get some solution and graph your solution that you come up with because we can give you credit for that. On problem 13, I have -14 is less than 7 plus 2x plus 1. So I can see here that I have 3 terms. So my first step is going to be combine like terms. Remember here that even though they're numbers, this is like I said, I walked in and want 7 fries and 2 hamburgers and another order of fries. So I need to simplify this all out. The negative 14, the less than, and the 2x all stay the same. And then 7 plus 1 is 8. Remember, same side combine. When you combine, you follow the terms exactly like what you see. You don't. The only time we do the opposite is when we're moving sides, because these are on the same side and we're just trying to clean it up. We do exactly what it says. Step 2 is to box variable. So I box the 2x, the positive 8 is on the outside, so I'm going to move that first through subtraction because the way to move a positive is to make it a negative. So like I'm saying, in the blue, they're on the same side so you combine them. What I'm about to do in red is subtracting 8 from both sides because I'm moving it to the other side. So the only time you do the opposite is when you move it to the other side. So negative 14 minus 8 is negative 22, and then the less than 2x stays where it is. Step 4 is to divide by 2. I didn't say by negative 2 because that 2 in front is a positive. So I leave my sign exactly the same. Now with this one, I'm going to switch everything. Remember, when you switch, the easiest way to switch is to write it directly underneath so you can see that everything became the opposite. Negative 11 moved to the right, x moved to the left, my sign flipped. Everything switches, so x is greater than negative 11 would be my solution. So when your letter's on the right side's the wrong side. So when your letter's on the right side, you can switch everything. Whatever you switch has to be a complete mirror image. So if you switch it, that's totally fine. It will help you with graphing because now we can see that x is greater than. We know greater than goes to the right. Just make sure you switch it correctly. So now I'm ready to graph. I have 0, negative 11 is on the left side. I'm going to have an open bubble because there's no line under the inequality, and greater than goes to the right. So this one has a lot of steps. We combine our like terms, box the variable, subtract 8, divide by 2, switch everything because the letter's on the wrong side, and then graph. Problem 14, they want us to write an inequality and solve. Alexia and her sister opened a savings account at the same time. Alexia deposited $260 and will put in $15 each month. Her sister deposited $200 and will deposit $18 a month. If they continue at that same rate, when will Alexia have less than her sister? So Alexia less than sister. That's what it's telling us right here. When will Alexia have less than her sister? So let's see what we know about Alexia. We said that it was $260 and $15 a month. So she's depositing a one-time fee of $260 and we are adding $15 a month. Keep in mind that deposit means add or put in. So deposit you put into the bank, withdrawal is taking out. So this, if they're putting it in, we're going to add. And then the sister puts in $200 and is going to deposit $18 each month. Now again, we don't know how many months. That's why we leave M in our equation. So step 1, I can see that I don't have any repeated terms on the same side of the inequality. So step 1 is going to be to move the smaller m, so the 15m, to the other side. And I'm going to do it through subtraction because I always do the opposite. So we subtract 15m from both sides. We pick on the smaller guy because we really don't want to end up with negatives. When we do that, 260 is what's left on the left side. 200 plus 18 minus 15 is 3 m's. Step 2, I can now box my variable because I only have one on one side. If you try to do that at the beginning, you would box here and see that you need to put your boxes together through the opposite operation. Now I am going to subtract 200 because 200 is on the same side as m and not in my box. So I have 60 is less than 3m. And then I will divide by 3 because 3 and m are attached through multiplication. So 20 is less than m. Now this one we don't have to graph, so you can leave that as your solution. You could also, if you wanted to write it in words or if you see it in words, 20 is less than m, so more than 20 months would also be an appropriate way to answer the question. Again, the only time you really need to switch is when you're graphing, so because we don't have to graph this one, we don't have to switch this one. Problem 15 is a super fun one. Which inequality represents all the values of x for y is less than or equal to -3 times x minus 6 minus 15 when y equals -6? So my first step here is different than any other first step we've had. We are going to, replace or substitute -6 for y. Because y and -6 are equal, and over here in my inequality, over here, I have two letters. I have an x and I have a y, and I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to replace y with -6 and leave everything else the same for my first step. Now that I have everything in numbers or in terms of x, I can solve for x. So step 2 is going to be distribute the -3 here. So -3 goes to x, -3 goes to -6, and everything else stays the same. After I've distributed, I need to multiply because I need to fully get rid of those parentheses. And I write out step 2 to make sure that I don't forget the -3 times the -6 because that's the biggest mistake. So -3 times x is -3x. Again, negative times negative is a positive. 3 times 6 is 18. Everything else stays the same. And I'm very careful to keep everything lined up so I don't lose anything. Step 4 is going to be combine like terms. On the right side, I can see that I have a number and a number. So I walked into McDonald's and I said I want 18 fries. No, wait, take away 15 of those. They are going to combine that and tell me that I wanted a total of 3 fries. Everything else stays the same. From here, I only have something being multiplied and something being added to x. So I can box my term or my variable. And I can subtract 3. I'm going to subtract it because that moves it through the opposite operation and moves it over to the left side. And then I am going to finish this off by dividing by -3. Be careful, my words were literally divide by negative, so I need to flip my sign. And again, once I remember it, I'm going to write it down so I do not forget it. I divide both sides by -3. Keep in mind that even though you flip your sign, you are not switching everything. So if the x was on the right side when you divided, keep the x on the right side. My number is -3 divided by -9 divided by 3. Stay on the left side. So 3 is greater than or equal to x. And again, this one we don't have to graph, so we don't have to switch it. If you want to, just for the practice, that's fine. You would get x is less than or equal to 3. Problem 16, they want us to solve this equation and see when we have 6 times r minus 10 equals 12 minus 5r plus 16, what will happen, or what I'm guessing solve for r. So on problem 16, the first thing I'm going to do is distribute on the left side to get rid of the parentheses. So 6 goes to r, and and 6 goes to negative 10. Everything else stays the same. And then I multiply what I distributed because it's distributed through multiplication. So 6r minus 60 equals 12 minus 5r plus 16. My third step is going to be combining like terms. On the right side, I have 12 plus 16, so I'm going to clean that up. 12 plus 16 is 28. Everything else stays the same. And then if I try to box my terms, I can see that I have terms on either side. So I'm going to move the smallest. Looking at my r's, I have negative 5r and a positive 6r. So I'm going to move negative 5r by addition or by adding. So I add 5r to both sides, pick on the smaller guy. In this case, negative 5 is smaller than a positive 6. So 11r, and then the minus 60 stays and the 28 stays. Problem 5, or step 5, is to box my variable. So I box 11r, and then I'm going to add 60 because I need to put it on the other side, so I do the opposite operation. So 11r equals 88. And then my last step is to divide by 11. So I divide both sides by 11, and r equals 8. So that problem has a lot of steps to it. First we distribute, then we multiply what we distributed. I then see that I have 3 terms on the right side, so I combine my like terms. Once I've done that, I have 2 terms on both sides, so I'm ready to move. I move my smaller letter, my smaller variable, through the opposite operation, which in this case is adding. After I box my variable, I move what's outside the box, which is the negative 60. I move it through the opposite, which is addition. And then I divide by 11. Problem 17, I believe this is supposed to be a w, so 4 minus 2w equals 16 minus w plus 6. So my first step is going to be distribute, and be very careful here. Remember there's an invisible negative 1, and if you need to write that negative 1 in so you remember to do negative 1 times w and negative 1 times 6, then you absolutely go for it. There's nothing wrong with throwing that negative 1 in there so you remember what you're supposed to do with that. From here, I'm going to multiply what I distributed. So negative 1 times w is negative 1w. Negative 1 times 6 is negative 6. Oops. Everything else stays the same. From here, step 3, again, I can see on the right side that I have 2 sets of numbers, so I'm going to combine my like terms. So that would be 16 minus 6. Let me get some things set up here. Everything on the left side staying the same, so that's why I'm writing in that color. The right side, 16 minus 6 is a positive 10. Now for step 4, I can see that I have 2 sets of terms on both sides, so I need to move my smaller variable. In this case, I have a negative 2 and a negative 1, so negative 2 is smaller than negative 1. And so I'm going to move it through addition because that's the opposite. So I'm going to add 2 w's to both sides. On this one and on the one above, if you move one and it's not the smaller one, that's not the worst thing in the world. But on inequalities where we have the less than or greater than, we have the specific rule where we have to flip if we divide by a negative. It's easier if you can try not to end up with negatives. But on these, it doesn't matter as much. Step 5, I'm going to box my variable. So I box 1w. And then I'm moving what's outside the box, so I'm going to subtract 10. So 4 minus 10 is negative 6, and be very careful on that because a lot of people on their test said that that was a positive. But if you have $4 and you owe me 10, you owe me $6. So if you borrow a 10 from me, you only have 4 to pay me back, you're in the hole and you owe me money. Now, 1W is the same as just W. If you want just for practice, you could say you would divide by 1. But dividing by a positive 1 does not change the problem, so negative 6 equals W is my answer.